History tells us there are few things as indicative of society's well-being as the health of its local arts community. And we live in an age of extreme convenience where social media platforms and streaming services put the creative industry at our very fingertips, at least theoretically, right? So the reality is that we've traded that convenience for transparency and for choice, and we're therefore also complicit in the open exploitation of our local artists. Now, I like a good old rant just like the next person, but thankfully there's that group of passionate visionaries, those glorious fools who are hell-bent on changing the world and making something better. I recently had the great pleasure of catching up with Mel Bainbridge. She is the co-founder and executive director of the Pack Music. Enjoy.
Exactly. Brilliant. All right. Mel, welcome so much. Thanks so much for making some time to talk to me today. Where to start? Streaming services, particularly music streaming services, good for artists, good for reaching out to communities and building an audience.
Good question. And look, I'm going to be really honest with you and say I don't think so. I think if you are part of the 1% and backed by major labels, yeah, absolutely, it's great. You've got a platform that goes to millions, if not billions of people globally, and that's fantastic. But if you are an independent music creator and don't already have a following and a label, you're lost in a sea of noise where you actually can't communicate with your community directly in any way, and you're practically unsurfaceable if people don't already know who you are. So I actually think, unfortunately, streaming, while it was lauded as this amazing sort of platform for connection, I really don't think it's played out that way over the last decade or so.
No, I think that's probably where I've landed as well. It's interesting you mentioned about some of the numbers. I did do a bit of a poke around, and I found some numbers from last year that said that the Spotify, which is the biggest streaming platform in the world, and I think one that we're all very familiar with, and I use, not trying to be holier than thou or anything like that, 640 million monthly subscribers. I also found there was one called Tencent, which is a Chinese sort of equivalent. There always seems to be these alternatives out there. Another 500 million monthly subscribers, and can go on and on. But I think the biggest challenge there, and I think that there's a certain fellow by the name of Daniel who's been in the for probably different reasons to why streaming services aren't great for musicians, but more to the point why some of these people aren't great for a community in general, and some of his investments in drone weaponry and so forth. So it seems to me that potentially not so much the technology, but maybe the ownership model is one of the challenges. Streaming service.
100% it is. Business models that are designed for shareholders and investors and major labels are not designed for music. And in fact, people like the CEO you mentioned actually have no interest in music. They've never actually picked up an instrument. So you know that these weren't designed to actually surface creativity or really give artists a platform. They were designed to make money. And bottom line is they're commodifying something that we think of as art. And I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with that as the business model that is my only access to distributing my music. And I do know that all of the other indies that I've spoken to feel very much the same way about it.
Yeah, and I can understand why, obviously, royalties being the underlying challenge for musicians and so forth, and that probably a little misunderstood by the end users as well.
Definitely.
And I think I've been on my own little discovery recently, but I guess renewed discovery recently of local artists. And it is, if you use it properly, if you go and look for it, you can find those nuggets. You can find that great local music that you're looking for. But how does that organically grow on a streaming service? Like, I'm not getting served up anything from a Spotify, for instance, that might be pertinent to anything I'm listening to or anything that I'm actually. So how does it how does
and
that
you
work?
won't, and you definitely won't, because the algorithms are not designed to surface that music for you. They are designed to enhance advertising content, bottom line. And so they're going to push, major labels actually push their artists into major playlists. And so they get surfaced, obviously, very prominently. Whereas if you're an independent artist and you don't have a monster following, you're not likely to find yourself on any of those prominent playlists that people are listening to, because it's simply not. It's not Spotify or, their ilk's bottom line. And in fact, you probably know this already. A couple of years ago, Spotify decided that if you didn't have 1,000 streams on a particular song in a particular year, they weren't going to pay you at all. So you don't get any royalties. But any play royalties that might be generated by your music actually go to the top 1% of artists anyway. So bottom line is we're subsidizing, and we independent artists are 80% of Spotify's content, and about 70% of Spotify's content isn't getting paid. So it's an extraordinary little situation that they've set up, which is really why you won't hear or you won't get served, if you like, through their algorithmic discovery engines, music that is local to you or music that is similar to music that you love that's local to you. If you can find local music or sort of independent music on Spotify, it's because you know the name of that band and you've gone looking for them, but the likelihood of you actually finding it organically is really low.
That's actually a really good point, and that's how I've actually been doing it. I've been finding them on other platforms, and I won't go down that rabbit hole of social media as well, which is another bit of a bugbear for mine, but deliberately trying to find some and then going back to and then saying, where can I find them on here? So yeah, it's a really good point. And I knew you'd be able to sort of explain the algorithms a little bit to me, because I've seen it on some of the your own commentary around it. Therefore, I think that's probably a good segue. I was wondering if you'd tell me a little bit about something called the pack music.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've had a long and bumpy history. So the pack started That started weirdly as an idea, a genesis that came out of what you'd call a startup incubator, if you want to call it that, out of Curtin University in WA. And we worked around the idea that as independent artists ourselves, we make music. We have an original band. We were not seeing streaming sort of giving us any kind of exposure, let alone any kind of actual revenue. And we didn't know how to address that. So we were looking at what the business model looked like of the streaming services and going, well, if that is the globalized norm, what is the inversion of that creature? What's the inversion of that business model, if you like? And so we sort of designed some stuff initially, which was really mostly around advocacy. It was mostly around sort of talking about why streaming wasn't benefiting independent artists and why it was benefiting the labels. And we know that the labels are the biggest shareholders in all of those streaming services, and that they make something like close to $1 million an hour through streaming services. So of course, they're going to be the ones who are profiled, but we actually wanted our artists to own a platform. We wanted it to be theirs. We didn't really understand how to do that to start with, because in all truth and honesty, I'm not a coder. I don't build sort of online platforms or streaming services. I just knew I wanted it to be different. And so we worked through architecture. We worked through what would that look like if it was the anti-Spotify. And I hate to say that out loud because they might come at me, you never know. But that's what we were looking for, really, is if Spotify is taking ownership away from artists, how do we give it back, and what does that look like? So we talked to a lot of artists in that first instance around, well, if streaming were to work for you, if it were actually a platform that you could use, what would it look like? And their sort of key comments around that was, we would own the distribution system. It would be ours. Our royalty payments would come directly from the people that play us, because there is a big problem in the business model of your globalized streaming services, in that they use a prorated model. And that just means that all the streaming royalties go up in a big old bucket and get dispersed by percentage of the entire catalogue. So if you've got a tiny little percentage, you're getting a tiny little percentage, if you're getting anything at all. So
after they take out a whole
chunk of admin, yeah, absolutely.
Well,
and then if
like
it goes through labels.
Yeah, Daniel's taken a big chunk of admin out over the journey, hasn't he?
You know it. And then, of course, if it's the labels that those streaming royalties are being paid to, they then take out their big chunk, and then the artist ends up with about 16% in the end of their own royalties, which is a bit rubbish. So that's just exactly what we didn't want. And we knew that. So we kind of started from that premise of, okay, well, how do we make this different? How do we make sure that the artists get the lion's share of the royalties, and how do we make sure that everybody who has a streaming subscription is only paying for the artists they're listening to? And so that was really where it started. We started as just a partnership, my partner and I, and then we grew into a company because we thought that's what we had to do. And we did that thing of bumbling around the startup scene for a long time and, trying to convince investors. And then we recognized that actually that was part of the problem. It's part of the problem in the streaming services. So it would be part of the problem for us. The minute you get big investors in behind you, they have a stake, but they also have an expectation. And that expectation will never surface artists, because it's not about art, it's about money. And so for us, we kind of evolved into a cooperative. And a cooperative effectively is a structure that does sort of allow for all of your membership to own the platform, if you like. And that's what we really wanted. And so that's where we're at now. We're a co-op. We're a user-centric, designing our user-centric platform around the cooperative model and the cooperative principles. And we're basically saying to our artists, which is unsigned artists, so we're not actually taking in label catalogues at all. So we're existing in the space that's all about your unsigned local artists. And then creating relationships with local businesses so that you can hear those unsigned artists in local businesses. So that might be your hairdresser or your fish and chip shop, or it might be your local IGA or your coffee shop or your band venue. So creating those spaces where we can actually hear local artists in our local communities and they don't get lost in the streaming quagmire.
Fantastic. I didn't. I mean, I did have a bit of a read around, and I did see that there was a relationship from business to the direct with the artists and so forth, which is fantastic. I guess. I mean, without putting words in your mouth, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see? Because it's like when you talk about, we mentioned earlier, millions and billions of subscribers on the mainstream platforms and so forth, and it's at the end of the day, it must be almost it seems like almost a insolvable sort of task to reach a volume of both artists and even though that it's in their best interests, even just reaching out to them and ensuring that they come on the journey, because it's, even though that local artists might not be, the algorithms aren't working for them and so forth, a lot of them are still on Spotify.
Oh, yeah.
And even some of the support. I mean, I remembered, I just, as I was doing some reading up, just reminding myself of some of the history back through COVID. There was a couple of very big name artists in more than, but Joni Mitchell and
Neil Young. Yep.
There was a few others who which I couldn't quite remember, but that it mentioned something about the vaccines during COVID and some misinformation, I think might have been the term used from a particularly well-known podcast that we're all, it wasn't me, just to be clear, a little bit more famous than myself. But I noticed they took them off, and it was a big announcement about that and so forth. They're actually back on Spotify and so forth. And it's sort of almost that, as there are with a number of things in our society, it's like that volume and that it's all too hard to do other things and so forth. So how do we get to that mass migration, to that mass sort of uptake, to that I think we all see as that utopia sort of outcome for these types of services.
100%. And you're dead right. That is one of our major challenges, is effectively two things really. Musos aren't joiners. I'm sure you know this. We're very independent humans, and we're not really pack animals, as it were. So we have this tendency to wait for others, which I think is one of our main challenges. Is that, we're out there saying we're building you a better system. We're doing it by remortgaging our own home, but we need you to get behind this, and we're not seeing them do that in volume. But I suspect when there is something to hold in their hot little hands and they really truly understand the design of the creature, they will. So the wonderful thing that's happened for us lately is Music Australia, which is our sort of new federal music body, did some amazing research recently through the Listening In research papers that they've just published. And they've found that 42% of streaming Aussies would pay for an Australian-only streaming service. So that's a good start for us in terms of sort of understanding what our market really looks like in Australia, at least. But the bottom line for us is, there are challenges everywhere. There are challenges in getting government to understand that cooperatives are uninvestable. So we can't go to investors and say, you guys need to give us some money. We need to come to government for grants, and they're ignoring us. They're spectacularly ignoring us, even though we could be the solution to the systemic problems that they're identifying. And so that for us is a bit of a sort of a key challenge and barrier. Definitely that critical mass, you're absolutely right. So actually getting enough musos and listeners and businesses on the platform all at the same time to achieve sustainability, if you like, can be difficult and will be difficult, no doubt. Our intention is to sort of pilot in and with local governments. So getting a whole bunch of our local govs on board and getting them to support effectively the business development challenge around that. So getting the businesses onboarded, because we firmly believe that once people are actually hearing that music and understanding how great it is, that getting our listeners onboarded won't be as hard of a marketing challenge. The key challenge for us is content. So, and I actually use that word advisedly because it makes me cringe a little bit, because I don't think of music as content, not in the way modern kids say content. I think of music as art, and to me, it's a very important part of our cultural communication. But getting that critical mass of content onboarded is going to be our biggest challenge, I think. So we're pre-launch at the moment, and what we do need, obviously, is musos to just get behind us, and not even necessarily financially, just to be able to say, yep, we want to be part of this creature, and we will upload music as soon as you're ready. So that's kind of where we're at. We know it is a challenge, and we know our little market, if that makes sense. So we know WA pretty well in terms of who's who in the zoo around our sort of music industry. But we do need all of Australia on board, and we're less familiar with other markets, with other states. We still think we can do it. We're pretty confident.
I think you'd need to be confident, and you'd probably need a very thick skin and a lot of resilience, Mel.
100%.
Can you just for some context, because this is not something that you guys started up last year, or you've got some journey behind you, right? And as you said, you've started off and you've been down the whole. Needs to be this is what everyone does in startups, and so that's the problem. That's not how it works. Ownership is an issue, and you're solving things as you go along, and that sometimes that takes time, but I think that also allows you to have a much better outcome at the end of it. But that challenge of almost people helping themselves a little bit, because I died into, you talk about it being good for musicians and so forth, and I would take it a step further and say it's better for the community. It's better for
absolutely
our whole country and so forth. And I think that it's in a world where everything is fast and convenience is for everything and so forth, and we're stuck with these terms, content, to describe something as wonderful and that we all value as art, then it's time to maybe look at different models and get behind winding it back a little bit, I suppose. Even some of the answers. So I think it's I've talked previously about convenience at what cost, and there's certainly a very, very large cost to us all that we're probably not that aware of, or a little bit asleep at the wheel, even though I think anyone who will listen to you and put the arguments forward will come to the same conclusion you have, that the status quo doesn't quite work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely agree with you. I think a revaluing needs to happen, a sort of a rethinking of the value of our sort of creative and cultural contributions across the arts, not just music. And I truly believe cooperative models actually have application across the arts and across a lot of our cultural spaces as well. So really we're thinking in a weird way of the PAC as a bit of a test case for that, because I think it does challenge that that assumption that there is only one status quo, that that the streaming monopolies have a chokehold on industries and there is no other way. I think it truly does. It does sort of lend itself to real creativity around the idea that, new systems can be built and born, that we don't have to just stick with what is because it's there. But I think that sort of assumption that the status quo is good for everyone, and particularly we've seen it in the digital and platform digital economy. We know it's not the case. We know it's not the case, and actually getting people to, as you say, come to that conclusion themselves, discover that these things aren't really working for them and never have been. They've only ever been working for the billionaires with the money in the back pocket. They've never actually been working for community, as you said. But we can change it. You know, I don't ever believe that a human-built system is something that we can't build better. And I think if you believe that we are at our peak as a human society, then might as well bail now. I think we have to believe it has to get better. So I think that for us, I mean, we're just thinking of it as one art form at a time. Let's apply new business models and new ethics. And I think that's probably where we come from in the strongest way is, you know, billionaires, we see you. You know, we see where your ethics are, and they're not with the people or the commodities that you're exploiting. And they do treat musicians like commodities, not like, you know, people making artwork. And I think we just want to build something that is the antithesis of that. So,
and you know, I think we shouldn't be surprised when we see billionaires or big corporates and so forth acting as they do. I mean, it's if you've got shareholders, I mean, publicly listed companies they have one driver pretty much, and that is to make money, and we shouldn't be surprised when that's what they actually pursue with everything that they've got. I think though that to your point, and I wholeheartedly agree, I think we all to some degree work or make decisions that are in our own best interest. Therefore, if there's a community ownership, there will be that community interest in working in its best interest. At least I think in theory, it's a better shot than what we've got at the moment. So
yeah, and I think we have to take it. Hey, if there's a better shot, we got to take it. And as you say, it has taken us a long time to get here. It has not been a road without bumps, but you know, we're still pushing uphill.
you know what they say, Mel. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So I think we take our hat off. It's we need people like yourself to push these barrows for us because most of us don't have the time, energy, or probably the imagination. But what we can do is recognise that there's an issue, and I think without going down the rabbit hole of economics and politics and so forth, but everyone's experiencing some cost of living pressure, one or another, or at least are aware of it if they're not experiencing themselves, and ownership and that drive, that pure drive for more feeds those problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about not being a coder and building stuff and so forth, and neither am I. But we are living in a time where things are changing rapidly. And I shared with you earlier a rather sad conversation I had with a young person who was lamenting AI and their own hopes for the future of being in a creative capacity and so forth. And I just wanted to see, get your view of, given that we're moving more and more into the world of AI, I mean, what do we need musicians for anyway?
What indeed? No, I'm absolutely kidding. Look, I'm going to be really honest with you and say I don't see AI replacing musicians. I see platforms like Spotify allowing AI to replace musicians on their platforms, and that is fine and dandy because they will shoot themselves in the foot doing it, frankly, because they'll lose their human content and they will end up just being a gruesome monster content generator. But my my conversations and my understandings of the Zoomer and Millennial crew is that they are craving real experiences, and they're craving human experiences, and they're actually, a lot of them are switching off. A lot of them are not spending time on social media. A lot of them are spending time trying to connect with each other in communities. And so from that, I think we are going to see a bit of an analog resurgence, and I really do hope that that's the case. The PAC's kind of very deliberately sewn into its fabric policies around non-AI music and non-AI generated music. We've been quite pragmatic, I guess, about the idea of AI being here to stay. I don't think it's going to go away any more than I think streaming will. But I do think there is a place for platforms that are truly just human driven and centre the artist. And that's what the PAC is designed to be. I don't think we are going to see a time where art is not important. And I think, and I say art in kind of almost a generalist sense, where human experiences of art, visual art, music, theatre, any kind of creative work, even the written word, I know it's so easy these days to write a Blinken book in 20 minutes with every AI system under the sun. But the bottom line is it doesn't give you human emotion, And so I think what I would say to young people is don't sort of be afraid of being part of the creative industries. Don't think that that's a space that will be subsumed by AI entirely. I think there will be a lot of consternation around how to license things and how to protect copyright, those kinds of things into the future. But I truly don't see us losing our sort of human creative conversations, because as long as those kids who are craving it are still craving that connection, I think we're still going to have a place to play. And honestly, those communities might start to look a bit more inward. And I think that's what the PAC is designed for too. It's designed to sort of localise those conversations and make them very human. But I think that's a great thing. I think that kind of thing actually protects culture, and it protects us against homogenization of culture, because we're having those conversations within our communities, and we're keeping those conversations alive. I truly don't think we're going to lose our creative industries to AI. I think the industries we may well lose to AI is things like marketing and those kinds of things. And that's because people can't discern at the moment the difference between real and unreal, which is a bit problematic. And I think it's going to become more problematic in the deepfake space as I guess the AIs get more sophisticated over time. But the bottom line is this will be down to individual places and spaces, platforms like our own, who actually say, no, we're drawing the line in the sand. And hopefully that's also our point of uniqueness.
I won't speak for everyone, but I certainly think that if you give people the choice now, I think well into the future that they will choose your model of listening, or your model of what art is, than something that's not generated by human. I mean, like for me, I hope that this AI promise that is going to give us all this extra time, because we'll be doing all these jobs we don't need to do, that'll give us more time to go and sit around and ponder the world and listen to some great music and be inspired by some incredible art and the written word and so forth. But I think it's all about there's nothing wrong with technology. We all use it. It's the use of it. It's the transparency about it.
Absolutely.
And having that transparency gives us the opportunity to make choice. And I still have faith in human humankind, I think people will make the right choice. I have a pretty strong faith in community. I think that that's what people actually are after, and it's interesting to hear talk about kids turning off and rejecting the sort of doom scrolling and all that sort of thing, which I hope is the case as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Technology is just a tool at the end of the day, isn't it? And it really is how we apply our ethics to those tools, and how, I mean, I hate to say it out loud, how we regulate them, that can enable or disable our ability to build those communities. And I think I like to think, I mean, people say streaming's the big evil, and I get it. I get why it is, but it is a tool, and it can be used for good. It doesn't have to be turned into a giant creativity sucking machine. It can actually be non-exploitative. And I think that's probably the case for AI as well. And I hope it is. I think that's just around, as you say, the way people interact with it and the way they make their choices around how they interact with it, and around the ethics that kind of sits at the top end of the business models that AI is being used to deploy into.
Yeah, I think there's hope, Mel, and you've given me some renewed hope. I'm so glad that I stumbled across the packed music. How does everyone else stumble across it? How do they find you? How do they support this incredibly great initiative?
Oh, I love that. Thank you for the opportunity to speak it. Well, we do have a website, so it's just patmusic.au, and that's the best way to sort of find all the information about what we're doing. We have a couple of provocations papers on there that explain a little bit around the streaming conundrum and what we're doing to kind of invert that system. We do have all the socials, even though most of them we absolutely hate, if I'm really honest. So we're on the Book of Faces, of course. We are not on X, because absolutely not.
Got to draw the line somewhere.
Got to draw the line somewhere. But we're on your Mastodons, and we're on your Blue Skies, and we're on your LinkedIn. So it depends what space you like to play in, but we exist on all of those platforms, sometimes reluctantly.
Sometimes there's a necessary evil to it, right? I mean,
yes,
use it as a tool so you can change the future, yeah?
100%. Yeah, look, when we can, we will create our own communities within the pack, I guess, universe, if you like. But until that time, we're on the socials that exist.
We all look forward to it with great interest in hopefully in the not too distant future. Before I let you go, Mel, was there anything else, one final thing, even if it to people, what advice, or what is the one thing that you'd hope people will do? Not the one thing, but the most important thing that people can do in their day-to-day lives to support not just the pack, but their local artists and local musicians.
Yeah, and I guess I'd say, the first one is obviously go out to gigs. Go out and find new music if you can. And it's out there and it's good. I'm really honest. I try and get out to local music when I can. And I'll go to stuff that I've never heard before, just because I want to know what's out there and what's new. And sometimes it's exceptional. But if you're not a gig goer, and I know a lot of people just don't love that scene, just don't love the pub scene, and I get that. Try and find it on your streaming services if you can. Try and look for, WA local. You'll often find some really cool little playlists that people have put together, that kind of thing. So you can go and search that out so you can listen to new stuff. I guess what I'd say is, if you want to keep music alive, can't just get stuck in listening to what you always listen to, because that creates nothing new.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I think the other thing is, once you find it, share it.
Share it, love it.
Don't keep it a secret. It's okay to be, to find someone and go, hey, this is fantastic. Have a listen.
Yes. 100%.
Don't be too cool for school and pretend that.
That you're the only person that ever discovered them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing too, and I echo it, I think people will be I don't know whether they I don't use this word with great trepidation, but I think people will be really surprised. And I don't know why they should be. I don't know why I was, but there is some incredible, not just music, but there's some incredible art being produced in this country. We should be so thankful of it, and we should all be going out and being a part of it as much as we can.
100%. We absolutely do. I think Australia punches above its weight in terms of its sort of creative outputs. I think our government needs to get behind it in a much bigger way. It's the economy we should be building as opposed to the mining economy, which we are building. But yeah, look, I agree with you. I agree with you.
I think government they tend to be a bit behind the wheel too, right? So I think if the rest of us get on board, then all of a sudden they'll think it's a great idea, right? So
absolutely.
Let's hope. Mel, it's been such a great pleasure. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for yours, Michael. It was lovely.